Hello. I love YouTube days where I have an idea and I have an idea and I just blast them all out there. I was going over some of my videos and I noticed a reoccurring theme in a lot of what's being said out there. And we talk a lot about internet noise. And there's like a thing with growing that's never discussed. And I really want to just stop for a minute and focus on it because it is really a huge part of healing, and I have yet to see any material on this. So we're going to call this space. And I can't remember what I called this particular video, but it's like space to be. And what I mean by that is there's a lot of opinions. There's a lot of shoulds out there. There's a lot of, no, you're right. No, you're wrong. And I talked about this in my video on truth from my podcast, Shifting Perspectives, that when you tag or you get into this concept of right and wrong, that's actually closed minded thinking that comes from your ethics. It has nothing to do with beliefs. It has nothing to do with your actions. It has nothing to do with your voice. I really need to sit down and just do a 5-part video of the 5 elements of the cognitive core and what makes them up, because this is really it. And a lot of people take right and wrong from ethics and they try and enforce them on beliefs. And this is the problem right here. So when you start to heal, a lot of it is you finding yourself and you trying to figure out what your beliefs are. And there's a lot of noise out there, especially if you have friends or a mother, or just anybody who has an opinion, which is just everybody. And forgiveness is a great example of this, which is actually what sparked this whole YouTube video right now. Is I was watching my video on forgiveness, and one of the things I say right away is whether or not you should or shouldn't forgive and what the right and wrong response is for forgiveness. Forgiveness is a belief, which means it's neither right nor wrong, it is. And when you are building your cognitive core, focusing on belief and perspective, what you're doing is actually sitting down and cherry picking what works for your frequency. So, and this is something I'm struggling with. This is something everyone struggles with when it comes to healing. We have this innate desire or drive to call up somebody we trust and say, "What do you think of this?" Which is actually the opposite of healing. It's the opposite of fortifying your identity. And it's really hard because I have somebody I love, I have somebody I trust. I have my VIP, my perfect fifth, who I call up. And when I first started my healing journey, well, he wasn't around. When I was in the middle of my healing journey, when he came in, I was relying on him for everything. I was calling him up, constantly asking him for his opinion because I was not trusting my perspective and I was not trusting my identity or my belief. So I was relying on him to plug this in so I could adjust my perspective accordingly to better match him, basically. And the more I healed, the more I realized that his opinion, as much as I trust him and love him, his opinion actually takes away from my identity. I'm going to say that again because it's really important. The opinion of others, whether you love them or not, actually takes away from your identity. And what ends up happening when you get that is it's this massive adjustment. I'm going to write that down. Um, the opinion of others takes away from your identity. Identity. So, what ends up happening when you are submerged in this kind of a situation where you're growing and you're trying to expand your beliefs and restabilize and rebuild your identity is you are literally trying to adjust your perspective to make sure it aligns with your truth. Your truth is an opinion. Huge, huge, huge societal misconception. There's a lot of noise out there screaming that truth is fact. And before you open your mouth and start screaming and arguing with me, we have 5 senses. I talk about this in my truth video. And your 5 senses are an opinion, and they are absolutely adjustable and unique to each and every person. Now, you can do your best to hardcore and hardwire scientific fact, which is all measured by a substandard. In fact, we require science to kind of give us a solid status because our five senses are not reliable. Unfortunately, 99.9% of us do not have access to the metric tools that a scientist has in a controlled laboratory where we can measure what's really going on. So we can argue all day long what color something is, what something it tastes like, if something is too hot or too cold. These are opinions. And these five senses that we have are just our personal metric to take in our experience to determine what our reality is, which means that a perspective, a perceived reality, is an opinion. And it's all we have to go on. And we have forgotten that. Now, take that aside. While that's going on, our ethics, hello, philosophy, is the measure of right and wrong. And again, it's an opinion. You can sit there and argue all day what the moral is, or what the morality is, or the moral metric is of each and every ethical topic. And by the way, politics is just a study of ethics. So let's step now into beliefs. Beliefs actually have nothing whatsoever to do with ethics. Beliefs are, I believe that I'm worthy of something. I believe that I am allowed my space. And this is huge. I live in New York City. You get on the subway, and there's a rhythm. There's just no other way for it. There's a rhythm. There is a rhythm. And if you're not used to the rhythm, you're going to get lost in the crowd. You're going to get shoved aside. If you wait for there to be space for you, you will be waiting forever. So you need to learn in New York City once you get here how to make space for yourself. And when I first got here, I really struggled with it because it was this, oh, I have to wait. I have to be polite. Oh, no, 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 it doesn't work that way. There's too many people. You are allowed your space. This is what I call survival 101 New York City. You are allowed your space, and you are allowed to take up as much space as you need, period. You are entitled to your space. Now, there's going to be people who tell you that you don't have that right. And there's going to be like 10 more people screaming, hey, what are you doing? She's got the right to space. And that's exactly what makes New York City so absolutely beautiful and unique is there is an understanding that there is a very much a limited amount of space here. And if you don't claim yours, you're going to get walked all over. And everyone is grabbing their space. But we're not just talking space as in physical space. I mean, okay, so a great example is you get off the train and you have to exit, and then you've got these stairs that go up one way or the other. You're supposed to stay to the right. If you live in New York City, this is like a message out to all of you, stay to the right. Wherever you are going, you are supposed to go stay on the right. There's people who don't know this, so they merge to the left, and that throws off the system. Every now and then you get a staircase where everyone knows this, and it flows beautifully. This is the pedestrian flow. Like this is it. Stay to the right. And once you get into that rhythm, you just flow, and it's kind of like pushing. It's pushing. It's pushing. It's New York City push. It's like mooshing. We all moosh together. And if you don't learn how to moosh, which is actually claiming your space for something as simple as walking up a staircase, you're going to be waiting forever. So you become very assertive in New York City. You have to be, because if you don't, you're not going to get your space. Now, the same thing applies when you're mentally healing. Really, this is a great metaphor. New York City is a great metaphor for mentally healing because when you mentally heal, you're doing the same thing mentally that you have to do in New York City in a subway. You have to claim your space. So you have, when you start to heal, there's this relationship you have with yourself. Now, abuse and overbearing parents and really aggressive religions that have been crammed down your throat or cultures puts you in a position where it devalues the self. This is why I agree with Ayn Rand 1000%. This is why I fell in love with Carl Jung. This is it right here. Because religion takes the self and shoves it down here. It literally, this is why religion is so toxic. It's because too many people use religion to devalue the ego, to devalue the self. Religion usually is the full destructive system of the self and the ego. It is the opposite of self-love. Get a religion, boom, self-love is dead because they prioritize this pecking order: God, your religion, your father, your parents, and you're down here somewhere in the garbage. And that absolutely destroys the ego. It destroys the self. It destroys self love. So that when we go into accept self love, when we step into self love and self care and mental health, that's when the guilt kicks in, because that guilt taps into religious control. It taps into culture. It taps into this patriarchy concept that God is here, man is here, and you are down here at the bottom of the barrel. And whatever you are, and it doesn't matter if you're up here, it's you are supposed to sacrifice for other people. It's a very self-sacrificial, self-destroying thing, and it is absolutely detrimental to mental health. Now, if you have found a way to have your ego, your self preserved with your religion, good for you. You have found a way to make it work in a healthy balance. Unfortunately, the majority of people do not experience that. When it comes to religion, I call it religious abuse. There's just, it's never talked about. And I talk about it a lot. Religious abuse. It's a thing. It's where a narcissist comes along and uses a religion to abuse other people and control them. Fantastic controlling and manipulation tool. The church has been using it for years. That being said, there's a pecking order, and there's this battle between the self and the ego and everybody else. So when you finally decide to self heal, this is actually what you're up against. It's your parents telling you don't be selfish. It's religions telling you that you have to put everybody else first. It's this, oh, you're not self sacrificing. How dare you? And that is a toxic belief that completely corrupts the system, that prevents you from growing, that prevents you from healing. And what that ends up doing is when you sit down and you start applying this, you feel guilty for taking your space. And unfortunately, the internet is loud. There's a lot out there that's just loud. And if you do not take your space to start building yourself back up, your identity, you're not going to go anywhere with your growth. This is a huge thing that you have to overcome in order to grow in mental health. You have to take your space. It is huge to growing because it is the process of saying, I deserve my spot. I deserve my space. And what that means in mental health is when you have your space, what it specifically refers to is you get to decide what forgiveness means for you. You get to decide if you should forgive someone. You get to decide if you should take someone to court to sue them for losses. You get to decide. And there's a lot of people who use the word should. Should is a red flag. By the way, should is one of the red flags that tells you if someone's a narcissist. If you hear the term you should a lot from one particular person, it doesn't mean that they are a narcissist. It does mean that they most likely could be, and you really need to raise your guard up and monitor for other narcissistic symptoms from that person. The word should is a red flag. You shouldn't do anything that you want to do. The word should, really huge red flag. My cat has a problem. Midnight. That being said, so when you are dealing with things like building yourself up, one of the things that you really need to do is mentally get yourself the space. And this is where self isolation really does a lot of good for you because it mutes and shuts out the noise. So while you are building up your identity again and restoring and cherry picking what beliefs are going to be yours, you really need to be doing this without other people influencing your decisions, because what you are doing is building your identity. And this is where you've got your cognitive core. You have your cognitive core processing. And if you are bringing in anything that is not you, it's going to completely throw off your alignment. You're going to adjust your entire system based off of somebody else. So that if that somebody else were to change their mind, break up with you, divorce, pass away, God forbid, you are now without a metric that's stable because the person who gave you the metric to begin with, the navigator of your system, is no longer accessible. You need to be the navigator of your system. And in order to do this, you require isolation, you require some serious self reflection, and you require space to just be. And if you grew up in a strict conformist or religious system, or with narcissists, you are going to feel guilt. This is going to be one of the hardest things that you have to overcome is you are allowed space to decide. You are allowed space to decide exactly who you're going to be and what's going to be important to you. And it is a very long, arduous process. What do you value? What do you want? What kind of a life do you want? And building all of this up, the more you build it up, the more you base it off of your desires and what you want, the more you define your identity so that your perspective becomes steadfast and becomes solid and it stops wavering and adjusting to other people. So give yourself space. Absolutely command that you have a right to that space. As far as the guilt goes, that comes from a belief that somebody else put into your system. There's that cognitive virus again that I'm going to be doing a webinar on, and I'm going to be showing you what a cognitive virus is. So once you identify, guilt is basically a red flag for cognitive virus. That's it. It's so simple, so simple. Guilt is a cognitive virus. 100%. If you feel guilt or shame, there is no, chances are you do have a cognitive virus implanted or supplanted inside of your cognitive core that is altering your perspective to reflect somebody else's beliefs. And you have to identify where that belief is coming from. I just need to do a video on belief. We're back to this again. We're talking about beliefs again, because belief, and I keep saying this, beliefs is the core of that cognitive core that completely alters. It creates the misalignment. It creates the pain. It creates the mental trauma. It all comes down to your beliefs, to what other people feel you should believe. And when you are building up your identity, when you are looking for your space, it's imperative that you do not take on any additional cognitive or toxic beliefs, because toxic beliefs are a virus to your cognitive core. That's all I'm going to say about this right now. I'm going to leave you here. Thank you so much for joining me. All my links are below. Subscribe to my newsletter. And if you want to start your healing journey, take a look at the services I offer over on my website. Thank you so much. And may the kindest of words always find you.